when you're in this hypnotic trance and you think you're conscious, you can see almost anything. These things are from outer space. There are strange things in the sky. Sky ships were taking souls away into space, and you're going to a trance. You think you're conscious. You can see almost anything. There were flying saucer sightings galore. You can see almost anything. There are strange things in the sky. We haven't been searching for the string. There were flying saucer sightings galore. We have to take the little people seriously. These things are from outer space, and you're going to a trance. Sky ship. Space. Space. And you're going to a trance. Sky ship. Explain. Space. Trance. Space. Sky ship. And you will swear that it's real. Sky ships. Explain. Space. Trance. Space. Sky ships. We haven't been searching for the string.
Coming up next from the Grassy Knoll, a terrifying look into the Orwellian world of brainwashing, disinformation, and ultimately control over you.
Welcome again to another segment of the Grassy Knoll on this October 5th, 2006. And you're back with us, Andrew Colvin. The website is andycolvin.com. And what we've been doing for the last two shows, and of course we had the response show afterwards, but we're going back a little bit to some of the, the kind of tributaries and side streets and dead ends or whatever that Andrew's come across when doing research, things he leaves notes to himself. To remind him of, who knows? I mean, maybe there's stories down all these events about which he speaks. So, Andrew, thanks for coming back. And all right, let's pick it up. You go ahead.
Well, just to preface on what these are, they're correspondences, and most of them relate to things we've already talked about. And what I'm trying to do is, as I sort of number them and say what they are, if I need to give a little reminder of how it links back to something we've talked about, I try to do that if I can remember.
Let me ask you, to clarify, are all these that we've done, the show 1 and 2 of late, and what we're going to do today, were they all involved in correspondences, or just what we're doing today?
Well, some of it is just research, like looking up Union Carbide and finding out a bunch of strange things. But they all have a synchronous kind of a thing to them, in that they seem to relate to other parts of the story. And to give a sort of an overview of it all, I did like the way Levenda summed up his trilogy by saying that this phenomenon is revealing things about the people that are engaged in manipulating it. So if you're just an average Joe, you may have a paranormal experience. Well, something about that experience will have a there'll be something about it that if you're sharp enough to notice, will link back to whoever created it or affected it or tried to manipulate energies to create that.
Just for our edification, is there in particular a family that presides over Union Carbide?
Well, now it's Dow. So that's like the Dow Industrial Averages. I mean, it's huge New York investment. It's global.
But we really don't know the personages behind them, do we?
Well, they're very secretive. I mean, they'll certainly have the corporate board listed somewhere, but I mean,
that could be window dressing too, huh?
Chemical industry is very closed.
Okay. And you know what? And it's funny because it goes back to one of the first ones ever saw the light of day, and that's IG Farben in Germany.
Yes.
Are you aware of them?
Oh, sure. And they interfaced with Standard Oil quite a bit during the war, and they were sort of the main line, if you will, pipeline for. I mean, it all connects. All these different hardcore, like the steel industry, which the Bushes were involved in, and then they went more into banking, and then so the Bush grandfather is funneling monies to the Germans during the war, and it's connected to armaments, and it's connected to oil and the chemical industry, and there's really just there was clear-cut corporate interfacing on paper between those two companies, and of course Standard links to Union Carbide in the same way, very structurally integrated. But like I say, they always sell little parts to and from each other to make it all seem, to make it kind of a blur, to try to figure out who owns what.
A very good point, and if I can inject a shameless self-promoting plug. On my website, on the homepage, you will find a link to a 1976 article about the dealings between United States companies, DuPont in particular, GM, and Ford, and with their counterparts. They do exactly what you said, Andrew. They play a shell game between one another so that nobody's patents ever got appropriated, shall we say, by military tribunals and such. And, of course, IG Farben was broken down and reassembled over here in the parts known as Bayer, Bassif, and Hoechst, which is now known as Aventus. So interesting that Bayer, which we've always known as an aspirin maker with the Iron Cross stamped on their little pills, interesting, maybe just a coincidence, but they are now making pesticides. Isn't it loving that a pharmaceutical company would start going into pesticides?
The nice thing about Lavenda is that he talks about how that connects up with the occult, how the corporate guys connect to the occult, and you again will find he literally comes out and says that it's fascism, that they are the ones who on a mass scale really initiated these occult activities, and therefore all the clues that you'll find will relate back to various parts of the fascist, whatever you want to call it, network around the world. And as you and I always sort of talked about it in terms of the class war, it's always kind of a class war thing too at its most basic level, but it sort of manifests in the monopolization. The fascists manipulate the theism. And Lavenda has an interesting definition of the fascist versus the serial killer, that they're virtually the same, and he makes a really good case for this using Jung and various psychoanalytical thinkers, that the fascist is a sociopath who still needs the approval of society, whereas the serial killer is a sociopath who no longer needs the approval of society.
Well,
and then he connects that to shamanism. The shaman is an integrated version of a person who has taken the leap into the unknown and come back. The serial killer is often a person who has taken the leap, well, as always is, and has never come back, and it's usually connected to some form of occult worship, sexuality. And it can be, and it was created artificially in a lot of people by MK Ultra, who could never come back from that, or had some flaw introduced in their behavioral pattern, so that later they manifest, a thing 20 years later, like this guy, the Amish shooter. And we should talk about that interesting little synchronicity that happened yesterday, don't you think, in relation to the Amish shooting?
Oh, sure, but let me...
Without saying who it was?
No, I'll tell you what. if you're going to go there right now, there's just one thing I want to say in retrospect. I would add something to the definition also of the fascists, because to me, they may seek the approval of society, but I think they also shape the approval of society basically to approve of them, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
And also, let's face it, the three biggest serial killers ever were socialists, I guess you could call them, fascists, and that would be Hitler, Mao, and Uncle Joe. So anyway, having said that, yeah, what do you want to hit upon as far as what we both spoke about off mic?
About the Amish story, what happened was a couple of days ago someone bought my DVD, and they had an interesting name. And I noted that name. I thought, I've heard that name somewhere. And then they emailed you and said that they needed to contact me, that they felt like their UFO experiences had been induced, like in some kind of mind control situation.
Okay.
And that they were sort of becoming afraid for their life because they, whoever did the controlling might realize that they've figured it out. And so I went scrounging around and I found a note where the person's name had triggered my recollection of this note. I found the note, and it was about a mind control operation that was reportedly in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh, where there's an Arco refinery, and apparently the stuff was happening on the refinery, or in the grounds of the refinery, similar to the old Tom Slick thing where they were running a CIA base out of a refinery. In this case, it was some kind of mind control operation, and I don't remember the source for that, unfortunately. I think it may have been Lavenda.
By the way, whatever happened to Arco, which was old Atlantic Richfield? Did they get absorbed? Do you know?
I think they're owned by British Petroleum now.
Yeah.
British Petroleum comes up again. They had this fake pipeline thing up here in Seattle for a while there. I don't want to go there, but this person, I thought, well, that's a strange synchronicity that person's name is almost exactly the name of this place where this occurred. Kind of an odd name, very odd name. And then I looked up her. It's a woman. I looked up her where she was from, and she was from within 10 miles of this Amish shooting location where this milk guy, was he a milk driver?
Well, that's what they said he is. Yeah. I'm surprised there aren't any milk.
Committed a supposed molestation of girls who, when they were asked, say that they don't remember the abuse. It didn't happen. So, and I met last night with a photographer who's a researcher who was talking about this case, and how strange it was that this guy doesn't remember, and perhaps he was, one of these people that had been mind controlled in some way, and then 20 years later they act out a scenario that they were, programmed to do or something. Well, this person also told me a story about some mounds. That was kind of an interesting little leap, and we didn't talk very much last night, but we talked about that, and we talked about these mounds in the big thicket in Texas that are in the swamp, and they have little bones buried in them that are like animal bones. So you were asking yesterday about what do they bury in these mounds, and so this part of Texas is these people were cannibals, the Atacapa Indians, but they had these mounds with these animal bones in them. And what else did I say? I made some notes on that.
Oh, and by the way, and this is not to be critical of the individual who emailed both of us. I don't know if that would be the individual's real name, and if it isn't, I think I'm going to email and ask if there is anything symbolic about that, if you will.
But this area of Texas has cannibals, weird UFO lights, huge reserves of oil and salt, with all the same things that you have in West Virginia in the past. Supposedly West Virginia had these really fierce Indians, and everybody stayed away. They were cannibals or whatever. And that was also where Spindletop occurred in Texas, which is you had talked about yesterday. But getting back, so that lady. Is there anything else to say about her? I did a little research on that town in Pennsylvania, the other town where the Arco place was.
Okay, yeah.
And the first hit I got was a church there that has a very Garuda-like Christ cross symbol for their church. It's just a cross with all this weird drapery going around it, very much like some of the old Garuda drawings. And they also had a symbol of Christ with a bird and pouring this elixir. I mean, if you back away from the explanation that they gave of who the characters are, St. John the Baptist and Christ and stuff, you see an image of an elixir being poured, a bird, an angelic being a prophet who sees prophecies. And if my thought when I saw that was, well, if this was Tibet, the person seeing that image would say, well, that's Dorji Shugden with, that's the symbol of that process. Dorji Shugden and the Garuda. The Garuda controls the elixir. There's the person who protects the elixir.
But Andrew, also, what we're trying to also, I guess, give air to amongst Christians, whether they're Romanists or whether they're Protestants or whatever, we've all been hoodwinked. Now I know you don't. I don't think you buy into the whole scripture thing and all that, and that's okay. But take it for on whatever plane you can, or whatever level you can. And I will say this: that we have been inundated with occult symbology. And so when you said to me, if you didn't know or if you weren't told who those figures were, well, guess what? You're right in a sense that you may not even know, and that is, it is very often the case that pagan representations are put out there, occult representations, at least in the eyes of Christians, right in front of Christians. And, they act as if they embrace it. You see what I mean?
Well, sure. I mean, that was part of the co-optation that the church has pulled off on all these supernatural sites and activities. Yeah.
Now, secondly, I also want to say something that you're involved with. This goes back to when we had on Adam Go Rightly. What you're dealing with is a legitimate, I would say, science or vein of research. It is called onomatology. And that is the science of names, which forms a very interesting part of the investigations of the higher masonry, and is only in this way that they have a connection created between the two sciences, and that comes from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. So onomatology is what you engage in at times, and especially in the last shows we've had. And that's perfectly legitimate because there's less coincidences and more deliberate usages of names. It's got a heavy medicine.
Well, I've got just a couple more items before we get into some of the numbers we left off on.
Sure.
Regarding that ARCO plant, they had been from Philadelphia originally, this ARCO division. It was the polymer division. And they moved to the suburb of Pittsburgh in 82. So that would have been right after probably, I'm guessing that this ARCO in mind control probably happened in the 70s. So soon after that, it was transferred to this other town in Pittsburgh, became Nova Chemicals in 1997, and then moved, now has offices in Calgary, Alberta, which is a big oil-producing area now, for those who don't know it.
Andrew, let me ask you this. If you were to name the community near Pittsburgh, would that compromise anybody?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think it would because, obviously we're not going to supply any more.
There's more than one name that it could be sounding like.
Well, what is the town?
Monaca.
Okay.
Monaca.
Okay.
And
no,
I looked it up. I looked up the name of this person just to see if anything came up, and there was only one hit, and it was. This is so funny. It said 2001 Gateway to Heaven Horse Show.
Horse Show.
The Heaven's Gate name is said a different way.
Right.
Gateway to Heaven, but spelled with a G-A-I-T.
Okay, yeah, clever.
Like a horseman's gate.
Right.
And it was the 2001 Gateway to Heaven Horse Show. The year of the 911.
Yeah, I only asked because I lived out there. I was just curious if I was anywhere near proximity and my memory could be jarred about something like that. But I'm not familiar with that town's name. I got a feeling it's probably south down the river from Pittsburgh.
Oh, actually, there's one more thing about that. The town that the Amish shooting was in was Nickel Mines, which is obviously an old mine, near an old mine, and these are consistently come back as being areas where paranormal things happen. They've been almost. I mean, one guy did a whole book on just how UFO sightings are changed or influenced by their proximity to gravel pits and also sources of electromagnetism like power lines.
Yeah, and they also may
definitely a correlation.
And they may be gateways as well to other things, but obviously they factor in largely in the mountainous west, especially Colorado, with the reported tunneling that's been going on perhaps for decades for underground facilities and such. Obviously mines in Colorado were big. And you could easily understand how that could get all honeycombed. I mean, that makes sense. Also, there may also be a mine that somehow, perhaps, plays into choosing Shanksville as the place to at least, if not down a plane, which might have gone down, and we believe, in New Baltimore, 6 miles southeast. But the shooting of ordnance into the ground and keeping people away from a mine that was located there. I know that's very vague, but I'm not, gone down that path. That's not that important right now. But a mine might also factor in the choice of the fourth event on 9/11.
Okay, well, shall I? I've got a couple of things I wanted to clarify from last time.
Well, yeah, let's do what we got to do in an hour, and we'll come back. Okay. Whatever it is, it is.
Yeah. I mentioned the murder of the 911 activist Zeber, Zebuhr, in Minneapolis. There was a synchronicity involved with at the time I was researching something else. I was researching West Virginia defense contractors, and there was a big one in Rocket City. By the way, the guy who I had a grade school friend who I interviewed in my documentary who helped negotiate Rocket City between the city and NASA. He is now. Do you remember that email I sent you? He went to South Africa. Oh, he's doing. Oh, I remember now. He's now doing seminars for Dow Chemical in South Africa. But Zeber was killed in Minneapolis. It turns out that this big bullet maker in Rocket City called ATK that makes all the bullets and also some space shuttle engines and things. They have their headquarters in Minneapolis, and I was just happened to be researching at the same time this guy was murdered there. Just something I noticed. There's probably no connection, but it was kind of a random killing. I mean, the guy was shot. Obviously, it seemed like it was a murder.
What was his line of work again?
What's that?
What was his line of work?
Well, I think he had gone to I think Buchanan up there in West Virginia, and I think he was a mathematics. Was he mathematics? He was in graduate school, I think. So he really wasn't very old. And the other thing about I was talking about the Seattle murders, all the weird murders that have happened that seem like they're perhaps mind-controlled guys, was that at the same time, not long after the Huff shooting, which was in March, where the 7 people were killed, and including the Navy raver, then we had another weird murder, and then I found out from a friend who works at a big hotel downtown that the Saudi royal family's been ensconced there for a few weeks prior. And I remember I made the joke to my wife, well, that there's probably going to be some more weird, terrorism, meaning like strange murders and things, anything to terrorize people they can use. Mm-hmm. And it was just an offhand joke, but sure enough, not long after that, I think it was a week, then this guy goes into the Jewish center and shoots 6 people. And he was, supposedly wasn't, I don't think he was a fundamentalist Muslim or anything, but it all got very covered up. Not much came out about what really, his motives were.
When was that shooting about again? When did that take place?
It was in the summer. I think it was early July.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
What year is this?
The Jewish Center.
No. What year?
Oh, this year.
All right. Something else is bothering me about this. I got to go take a look. This is reminding me of something. I won't say anything else. I'll get back to you. It's just one of those. I don't like to use the word synchronicity in something as gross as this, but it's just something's hitting me, and I'll get back to you. So go ahead.
Okay. Getting back to my Union Carbide notes, number 67 was the Canadian and international aspects of the Union Carbide were in a separate category of their company. So they had 4 divisions, and the Canadian and international were in a separate category, perhaps making it easier to have these strange activities embedded in the Canadian part of the company that was linked to the Martin Luther King shooting. 68 Sea Drift. Oh, this is a list of other locations of Union Carbide facilities: Sea Drift, Texas; Torrance, California; Sistersville, West Virginia; Brownsville, Texas; Marietta, Ohio; Puerto Rico; Scotland; Brazil, 1961; Japan, 62; Sweden, 63. They had already had one way back in Norway, much earlier in the century. Bombay, Antwerp, Taft, Louisiana; Prentice, Alberta, Canada, and that's it.
So this is like one of the first actual globalized companies.
Absolutely.
Multinationals. Yeah.
69. Rubber suit analogy. This is my analogy for reality. That it's kind of like you're at Union Carbide and you're working in the division where my cousin works with the Bhopal gas. You reach in with these plastic rubber arms and you handle, you mix stuff together.
Right.
And sort of one of the mental symbols I use, and it sort of relates to Buddhism, is how we interact with reality. And to me, it's like you've come in a rubber suit like that. You've entered it into this lifetime. And the unique thing about humans is that you're not tethered to the earth. You go in, you're no longer tethered to the wall with the rubber gloves. You break it free. You're inside. You've got the rubber around you. But what's inside experiencing all this, the consciousness, is not the body. It's not. You're just occupying the body for the time period that you're in there working with dangerous chemicals.
Right.
And I don't know why I even put that in there, but that was something I was thinking about one day. Oh, well, here it says seeing basically. Okay, this is a better point. That to understand the Buddhist cosmology, it's like if you imagine what's underlying all of this is a field of energy, and what creates the manifestation in the beginning is the fact that certain parts of this large infinite field suddenly start to absorb light. The light is the only thing that's moving in the beginning, so to speak. And then, for some reason, light becomes to be sucked in certain areas, and then objects form. And then you have light and shadow being cast from the objects. And it sort of ties in with the whole alchemical view as well. And part of it's a good way to help understand the descent of spirit to matter and matter back up to spirit, which is pretty much the cosmic dance that's causing all of this strange phenomenon. Like, for instance, I wanted to point this one out from yesterday that I printed out. Where is that? It's a recently posted. Okay, here it is. Posted just yesterday. A friend and I were walking along in Wautoga State Park, West Virginia. This is near Marlinton, where I saw a strange creature one night when I was with a bunch of guys from my high school.
Were you drinking?
Marlinton. It's over there where they have the listening posts and things.
Right.
Foggy night. They looked at a fence row as they're driving by. They see, okay, we're on Route 219, just out of Siebert. We see a very tall, almost glowing figure of a man suddenly rise from the ground next to a fence post. The man didn't stand up as one would from a lying position, but rather sprang straight up without bending his knees, similar to the way Dracula rises out of his casket in the 1990s film Bram Stoker's Dracula, but much faster. Once he was in a standing position, this man, in quotations, stared intently at our car as we drove past, turning only his head to follow the car. He made no other movements and didn't attempt to follow. 6.5 feet tall, bald, and had an eerie halo-like glow around his entire body. It reflected in the fog. His body was self-illuminated and not an image caused by the headlights. I know this because the figure was looking right at me as we drove by, well out of headlight range. So, this person saw a man in black type, well, he saw an ultra-terrestrial, you might say, or traditionally, in the old days, it was called Man in Black. Now, Man in Black has been corrupted by the new sort of things that have happened, but they also call it the Spring-Heeled Jack. They say you don't want to see very many of them because it's not a good sign for you if because you're literally seeing into the other side at that point. And sometimes these beings can predict, or not predict, but they're harbingers of perhaps not the greatest.
Of ill tidings.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. If you can address this for a moment, you might not. Again, you're just making me think of something. Has the Garuda or any type of Garuda type being ever been associated with the owl?
The owl?
Yes.
Well, certainly that's. I mean, from A to Z, really. From the debunkers who want to say it's just a big owl to people worshiping the stone owl of Moloch. Which, by the way, Moloch is an archetype that was seen in MK Ultra experiments, like some of the LSD cases from Europe, especially with Stanislav Grof, who documented these in very detailed manner. These people who had their brains opened up, or their minds opened up to these other forces. Oftentimes without knowing what was going on.
The reason I bring that up, Andrew, is because there is, I believe, Indian lore, and you might be aware of that. That it is not, because you said it is not good to see too many of these characters. In Indian lore, it is not a good thing if you hear the hoot owl 3 nights in a row, and that's somewhat alluded to in the song by Michael Murphy, "Wildfire." But at any rate, 2 nights ago, I walked outside, and for the first time in many, many years. I heard the hoot owl. I went back out the second night and the third and didn't hear anything, so I guess it's okay so far. But I'm being serious about the owl as being an ominous and sometimes evil portent. And also, it is on the front of our Masonic designed dollar bill. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Well, if people were more aware of the things that we're talking about, then they would respond properly to these kinds of things when they happen, because it's not an end result. I mean, it's you still have moved to exert your own will. If you've seen one of these guys, what I think the deeper message of this story is that when a pattern develops, and it's a pattern that you need to be concerned about, then you need to change. You need to change your energy, and this is where certain meditations come in, or certain rituals or practices, and we all have them. And a lot of times it doesn't really matter which genre of ritual you're using.
Right.
But as long as you do something with intent to change that pattern, in the Indian world, the yoga who's experienced this starts doing things backwards. So they start joking with the fearful phenomenon. So anything to break the pattern.
And Andrew, also, I don't believe this flies in the face of the Bible. I believe this is something that is built in all of us, and we've lost it somewhat in an urbanized environment. I do believe that people who are in tune, anybody, I don't care who it is, if you're in tune to the cycles of nature, your environment, you can sense things that are coming. I don't care. This is not mysticism. I think this is a reality, and I think it was built in us for good reason. And we've lost that as we've gotten more cosmopolitanized. Do you want to speak to that at all?
I agree with that. One thing, you're kind of low on the volume, and I'm having a hard time catching everything you say.
All right, I'm sorry. I'll readjust that.
A little bit, that will help. But
okay, how's that? Okay.
I totally agree.
We human beings are not above or separate or detached from the world we live in. Our feet are on it every day, and I think there's a reason for that. And we've lost those, what I would call, in quotation marks, bones. You know what I mean? We've lost the bones about what's going on.
Well, all we're doing is slowing down the passage of light through us, and light has intelligence, as tests have proven. And I think that's where consciousness comes from, and intelligence comes from light. And we're just slowing it down a little bit as it passes through us. But we're totally connected in every way to the physicality of the world.
I'm not going to belabor the point. The leitmotif is something that Christians are very wary of, and I am as well, because of the way it can be.
Because of the Lucifer thing?
Yeah, of course. Because of the manipulation that does take place, and it's essential to a lot of religions, especially like OTO and such, which is kind of nasty. But
water too. You could also say that we're water.
Well, we are, aren't we?
We're a stream, and we've slowed down the stream a bit in our particular spot that we're occupying.
But the point's well made, and I think we should all remember, that there was a time when we were much grounded in our existence than we are today. That's all I'll say.
Okay, number 70 then. The new Mothman book by Jeff Wamsley was printed in Venice, Florida, which is where the hijackers train, 911 hijackers. There's a whole scandal down there behind the fact that they were playboys and not fundamentalists.
Well, of course, and you're not asking me, but the reason they did that was so they could be remembered. Behavior just like Lee Harvey Oswald engaged with.
Exactly.
Right. I'm preaching to the choir, but for the people that are listening, 19 Arab hijackers in planes, I'm not so sure. 19 jerks hanging around and being dummies so they could be remembered? Yes. And Venice, of course, was one of the places.
Yeah. Also, there's a Mothman witness living there now, supposedly, very close to that place. 71, I talked to a Bigfoot researcher who did some study in a place in South America that was a base for this Nelson Rockefeller missionary operation to basically pacify the Indians. And this researcher told me that there was a code word called White Crow. I hope no one gets triggered by that. A note I made, he said that he was told that Bigfoot's built the mounds. There was in that area of South America, they had discovered oil in, what year was that, 67. When the Rockefellers came down, they built their own plane that had a special high-tech, the whole plane was outfitted with computer items. And it was a 737, I believe, and it flew over the jungle and it shot out sideways radar that went under the canopies of the trees to locate more resources. And so this was all happening around the time of the Mothman. The discovery of oil, and then this weird plane that was mapping the entire Amazon. And then within a few years, you had reports being investigated by Jacques Vallée, the UFO investigator, involving natives down there who had been fried to a crisp with these microwaves coming from, reportedly they were appeared to be remote-controlled flying vehicles that were flying under the canopy, or right above it again, but just much closer, and then shooting out sideways beams that would sometimes hit them, and they would be microwaved and die. And one guy, like, his muscles fell off while he was still walking or something. There's some horrific story in the literature that Vallée investigated. 70? No. Oh, there was one more point with 71. The head of Dal is Greek. We had some Greek connections to the Mothman back when Dal was Union Carbide. The name involved another note there, 70B, or 71C, I guess. The name of the ship involved in the Philadelphia experiment, the Andrew Furaseth, has the word Seth in it, which is, I believe, a derivation of Set, which is part of the Horus-Set dichotomy that we've talked about before. And also, the name Indrid Cold, if you take the two D's out, it spells Inri, which is what's above Christ on the cross. Just little things.
Okay.
72. Oh, we're back to that week in March that I talked about before. There's a couple more entries for that. I remember I said in March we had Bush Cheney in Cleveland, in West Virginia, the Zephyr murder, Charlie Sheen 911, bombing of Iraq on the 3rd anniversary, lows in the polls for Bush, Sago mine disaster, my niece broke her leg, Warren Coleman predicts terror strike, dog torture in Tacoma occurs, at agent provocateur attacks to yours truly. Discovery Channel kitchen entity was shown 2 weeks after my photograph was posted. And then 2 more items that add to that would be the Mothman movie replayed on TV. And then there were Seattle murders on at the end of that week. That was when the first major murder occurred with the 7 people that same week. And it's weird because, like I say, I own a house a block away, and it was like 3 hours after the murders had occurred. I happened to be over there working on the place, and I heard someone horrifically scream, and kind of went out there looking for where it was and couldn't find it, but I didn't know. But I was actually hearing someone scream who had probably gone to identify a body. And the body was probably there at the same. I don't know. I don't know how long it took him to get rid of to clean up the scene. But I know that by that night, the police were already saying that they would never find out who did it or why he did it. It was all very, very strange. It was one of those cases where they're just telling you right up front they're not going to investigate it. Okay. What else? 74. Spy chips went into passports about a month after that. So that would be May 1st. They started putting little computer chips in our passports. That, who knows, I guess records every place you go, and also has certain pieces of information in them about you.
Well, that's going on also.
The website, I can't remember the name of it.
But, in Florida, we had this episode a little while ago where you have now on your license, should you get that particular one, which will turn out to be a national ID card, you have under a third ghost photo, which is very hard to see unless you hold it, the card up and can kind of see the image there. It's got secret data. And it's like, this came out in the papers. And it's like, what do you mean, secret data on me? Are you kidding me? You know what I'm saying? So, you talk about the chip passports. That's bad. And also this other situation where, so the cop takes your license and is reading more about you than you know about yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, I love my country.
Here's a good one. Number 75. It's just so strange.
What, 1975?
No, number 75.
I'm kidding.
1971. Yeah, it's in 1971. The 9 declared the start of a new era. And this is from the book by Lyle Watson called Supernature, where he talks about the 9. There's another author writing about the 9.
Didn't Lavenda do that too?
He wrote about the 9. Andrew Puharich wrote a book about the 9. his book on Uri Geller is essentially about the nine. But the interesting thing about this book by Watson is that they had this whole thing going on in Florida with these. They were doing something similar to what they did later in California and Stanford with these remote viewers. They had a group of psychics in Florida that they were studying. And Puharich, I think, was involved in. I don't remember if Puharich was too involved in. I think he was, though, actually. But the weird thing is that the three psychics that they talk about in the book their names are. Should I say their names? Well, basically the three names of the same names of the family of the kid that had all of these. The Mothman contactee friend I had, it was his family had the same three names as the names of these three psychics in Florida: Tommy, Bob, Bobby, and I won't say the mother's name because for certain reasons. But yeah, is there anything else with that one? 76. On May 5th, 06, three mystic dwarves were seen, this year, were seen, three mystic dwarves seen talking to judge in Philippines. Or a judge had an experience with three mystic dwarves. And it's just another one of those three entity things. We saw these three entities in 2003 at the Mothman Festival, which we suspect had something to do with the three entities we'd seen the year before on Woodward Drive. And there's also these three Indian stories here in Seattle that involve people have had their lives saved by these three Indians. And I actually interviewed one of them in my movie, although he was in South America when he had his experience with the three shaman that people see everywhere. I think you even mentioned once that there was a Christian analogy to that. Or am I misremembering?
I restate that analogy to.
Well, it's sort of like the Father, Son, and it's like the Trinity in a way. You know, these three beings that have been seen in various guises and also in like spirity form. Like we actually saw three like balls of light, kind of.
Well, also, yeah, you do have. All right, from the Christian point of view.
You go from physical to material, from physical to very gaseous in how they appear to you.
Remember, and I know you know this, but I mean, again, Christianity is built around the Trinity, but also we would also state that occultism counterfeits. So you do have a Trinity with Lucifer, Satan, and Baal, and you also find things happening in three. In fact, the classic Masonic assassination team would always be involving three personages. That's why what happened with the three hobos down in Dealey is quite interesting. Not that they were necessarily the shooters, but they definitely were involved, but it's always threes.
Yeah. Number 77, Apollo 11 tapes are missing. I think we mentioned that before, maybe.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right. That was only, a couple of months ago that was revealed that they can't find the tapes and the video also, apparently.
Number 78, I talked to someone whose brother works at SAIC. This is a big defense contractor in San Diego. They said that SAIC was listening to bin Laden. And then there's a name of General Downing, fake weapons of mass destruction. I don't know what the connection is. Can't remember. Also, SAIC had a connection to the Heaven's Gate thing in that they had the same server as, I think they used Heaven's Gate as one of their servers or something. And the server was in Minot, North Dakota, which connected up to the Son of Sam somehow. But the guy who did the anthrax, who was brought up on, sort of the guy who was like a red herring, Hatfield, when they had the anthrax attacks, he was connected to SAIC. And then recently they had an anthrax. Did we talk about that with Oberman? Where Keith Oberman got sent the anthrax?
No, when did this happen?
This was last week. It was the same day or within 24 hours of the FBI issuing an article to the press that was printed that said that we need to be concerned about. Oh, no, they were trying to rewrite what happened on 911. They were trying to say that the gist of it was the FBI came out with a press announcement somehow spinning the truth about 911 anthrax, which again, I point people to Paranoia magazine and then ask them about that article that just blows the story out of the water, that it is all connected to these various.
Well, also you'll find it,
and the Tell Institute and so forth.
It's interesting also that Oberman came out with this, articulate rant about Bush and everything, which to me is just more distraction because it's a Republican's fault. And but anyway, by all I guess plumbing people's feelings about what he did. Obviously, the Democrats, just think he's the best now. And so lo and behold, guess what? He gets his anthrax.
Well, along with number 78, there's also a very interesting link. This is very odd, but it's and I think it's important is that there's a connection between Manson and Heaven's Gate, and it is through someone that I happen to know. I interviewed a guy for my documentary who I was in a band with in Texas. We played some of the music on your show, and he is the first cousin of Sharon Tate. I think he's the first cousin. He might be second, but I think he's first. And he told me recently that his aunt, who I'm not sure if it's the mother of Sharon Tate, but it might be her aunt.
Right.
Dated Applewhite, the guy who headed the Heaven's Gate cult. Now, mull that one over.
I know.
How does the Tate family? By the way, their dad was an Army colonel, and there was something that happened to him. Anyway, Texas Army family being connected to those two.
But then Sharon Tate Tate marries Polanski, who is a little on the macabre side. So this doesn't really shake us then. When you think about the whole cohort, you know what I mean? And of course, Polanski at that time was doing Rosemary's Baby, which is a little bit on the, was heavy stuff for that period.
Yeah. Number 78. Oh, I guess we're still on 78B. Here's a Union Carbide connection to Bohemian Grove. The big investor in Dow, D.D. Wilsey, her grandfather, her great-grandfather was the big scion of Dow. She married she married a guy who was in the milk business. So they melded milk and chemicals together. And I also noted that in our valley that we lived in, the chemical plants all had milk. That was their basic remedy if you ever got exposed to something, was to drink a bunch of milk. So they had this huge stock of milk that they were always going through, just a constant moneymaker for whoever was making the milk. And in the Wilsey family, you see the connection, a direct connection of it on the West Coast. But Wilsey was a member of Bohemian Grove, the husband. And
the Bohemian Club, yeah.
And what else do I have here?
Also, Andrew, before you leave that, on October 3rd, we did an interview with a dentist, and we were talking about a number of things, and one of them was the canard that welders like my father were told to drink milk as an antidote to the poisonous fumes of the welding, because it had calcium in it, which is known as, I guess, somewhat of a leaching agent.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, there's something to it. I'm not saying it's totally made up.
I am.
Oh.
No, I think it's pretty much, eat carrots because it's good for your vision, like that's what they gave the pilots. Yeah, okay.
Now, the other connection, though, is to the occult here. In this same 78B, we have the woman who, the woman he left to marry Dee Dee, Mr. Wilsey, his first wife was named Montandan, and she was a well-known personality in San Francisco. She had a TV show. And during the TV show, a bunch of weird occult stuff started happening to her. Some shaman came into her house and cursed it or something. I read the book. She's got a book called The Intruders, and I can't remember all the details, but I remember the shaman cursed her, and then she had all this weird stuff happen, people getting sick in her home, and then a woman was murdered there. and there was this influx of weird, marginal, strange folk who were dealing drugs and all kinds of stuff, and there were Satanists involved, and it was just a bizarre thing, all linked to, carbide in this indirect way. 79. Psi calls, let's see, this is kind of I'll try to blow through this. I've already talked about the pooling. Okay, Roddenberry was a member of the Nine. Gene Roddenberry, here, this is a good one. Gene Roddenberry was a member of the Nine. He was one of the people that were, this was the interest in the Nine was throughout, like, the upper class. They had, I list some of the people involved here. The Bronfmans of Canada come up in other ways in the military-industrial complex stuff that we've talked about. The Swedish nobility is mentioned, and that links to JFK because Oswald's handler was Swedish nobility, de Mohrenschildt. Gerald Ford is mentioned as being a follower of the Nine. And Ford is interesting because he owned the Ford Modeling Agency, if you'll recall, which Candy Jones worked for, and she wrote the book about mind control, saying that she'd been mind controlled while she worked there. And Ford connects to Manson, as we talked about. Manson tried to kill him twice, and that would have installed Nelson Rockefeller in the presidency. And this connects up to the gemstone file stuff, used aircraft. A3 Sky Warrior is made by Hughes, and that's the plane that supposedly
impacted the Pentagon.
Impacted the Pentagon, isn't it?
That's right.
They actually found some engine. What was the engine from it? And someone actually photographed it being carried off.
Well, if that's what's underneath the tarpaulin, that's very interesting because, why would you tarp a piece of what was probably a piece of an aircraft? I mean, it wasn't a body that were taken out, and they chose to carry it out, shrouded underneath this blue tarp.
And then also involved in the Nine were some British royalty. For instance, in the Lyle Watson book, Supernature, there's, I think, the main guy sort of organizing that meetings with these psychics in Florida was from Britain. Number 80, Eugenia Macer's story. I've talked about her before. Macerstory. She wrote a book called The Sorcery and the UFO Experience. And basically the whole theme of the book is that the Garuda connects to UFOs. And I didn't know any of this until earlier this year when I found the book. And then we have... but she in the book, she talks about Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahman, the three Buddhist deities. Vishnu is the preserver, and he represents spirit. Shiva is the destroyer, representing body or manifestation, and Brahman is mind, or the creator, or consciousness. And evil is defined in the Buddhist world as Shiva cut loose from the others. So body manifestation is cut loose from mind and spirit. And I think that some of the things you just said today sort of hint at that split that we have going on now in our society. 81, Garuda is the central theme. Okay, guess we'll go to 82 then. Puharik in his book Beyond Telepathy talks about Kundalini. He studied Kundalini, which has come up in involved. Some of the Mothman witnesses have experienced something like that after they've seen the creature. And he also studied two serpents in voodoo in South America. So they're doing rituals in South America in voodoo, the voodoo world there, using two serpents, and trying to remember. Anyway, the two serpents usually has something to do with the Garuda or the Thunderbird. 83, South American Indians believed in UFOs. He found some tribes that believed in UFOs and used magic to communicate with the UFOs. 84, 24. Garuda uses 3D omens, three-dimensional omens, in symbolic patterns. It's just something I thought of one day. Okay. They can affect photos. So the mind can affect photos, and that's in page 238 of Beyond Telepathy. He talks about experiments where he set up this blank film, and he had psychics actually influence the film using just their minds, and he set it up so it couldn't be refuted. And there's also a book called The World of Ted Serios, Serios, by Joel Eisenbud. And this is a guy, Ted Serios, and I'm just looking at some of the pictures. There's all these pictures in here that he created with his mind. What else do we have?
Are you saying they projected their thoughts onto silver paper?
Well, Puharich proved that you could influence the film. You know, shapes would appear. But this book by Eisenbud claims that these photographs, which are pretty clearly, pretty clear. I mean, they're blurry, but there's actual things on there. And I can't really remember the exact methodology that they used.
Well,
how. I mean, the guy's a medical doctor. The author's a medical doctor, so it appears to be very scholarly done,
okay.
Well done, or whatever.
We're going to have to hold it on that note because we are out of time. But we will continue this until it's done. And thank you for being with us. And
we've got about 100. Yeah, about 100 items.
And how many left?
Well, just 15.
All right.
Do some questions. I guess.
Yeah, we'll do it next segment.
Be on the next one. Yeah.
Sure. All right, Andrew. Thank you very much for being with us, and hang on the line, and folks, stay with us for our next segment, and also you can find the rest of the interviews between Andrew and myself. They're still on the archives. Okay. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Biz.
That's enough music for now, lads. Looks like there's dirty work afoot. music for now, lads. That's enough music. Looks like there's dirty work afoot.